Welcome to the Reno Air Races, the only race of its kind in the world. Hello, I'm Mark Chiolis, and if you like airplanes as much as I do, then you're really going to like watching this video. Over the course of the program, you'll get up close with all of the different classes of airplanes and their pilots. Plus, you'll learn about what it takes to fly and race these fast and safe. To kick things off, let's take a few moments to enjoy watching the Sport Class and Super Sport class of airplanes as they start their engines, taxi in the airport, and fly the course here at Reno. The sport class of airplanes are probably most like those that you would see at your local airport, but many of these have been built and modified to fly faster and with increased aerobatic capabilities. Here's Sport Class President Lee Beal to tell us more about his airplane, Breathless.
I'm the president and the founder of the Sport Class, and the Sport Class Races kit airplanes. Now, most people don't even think that such a thing exists, but there are manufacturers who build kit airplanes, and we're talking about real airplanes that you can fly, that you put together from a kit. And not only do we fly them, we race them. And this is an example of one. It's all made out of carbon fiber, which is like fiberglass, and it actually gets glued together, not unlike you would glue together a model airplane. And as it turns out, there are hundreds of these airplanes that have been built, and we bring them all here and race and just have a wonderful time. This particular airplane I've called Breathless because it doesn't have a turbocharger. Most of the race airplanes have got a turbocharger, which is essentially an air pump that pumps extra air into the engine, allowing us to put extra fuel into the engine, and gives it a lot more power, and that makes it go a lot faster. But I don't have one of those. So I had to do some very clever things with the shape of the airplane to make it go faster through the air. The way I did that was I took yarn, just little tiny pieces of yarn, and I taped them all over the airplane, everywhere. And then, after I did that, I went up and flew in formation next to another airplane with a guy with a camera. And he took a picture of each section of the airplane and where that yarn was pointed. And that told us whether or not the air was flowing smoothly or whether or not the air was turbulent. Now, we found a really important spot over here. Most of the air was flowing nice and smoothly around the airplane. But right in here, we had a big area where the yarn was pointed straight up, saying that something weird is happening to that air. Now, we knew if we could make that air flow smoothly around the fuselage, we could make the airplane go faster. That's exactly what we did. So we just put foam on the side of the airplane here, and then we smoothed it out with sandpaper and put some fiberglass over the top of it to make it structurally sound, and we made the airplane fatter. So the airplane is very fat here, and it allows the air, when it comes around here, to stay attached. And we found a huge drag reduction. So suddenly, without a turbocharger, I'm going as fast as the guys with a turbocharger. And of course, that makes it wonderful for everyday flying because I'm not burning as much fuel as they are, and it just makes for a cool thing. So after we did this, we were pretty proud of ourselves, and I had a T-shirt that was made, and it said in script writing, "The world's fattest Lancer Legacy." And of course, when everyone read it really fast, they thought it said the world's fastest, but so everyone gave us a double take and so forth. But that's among the things that we've done here just to make the airplane go a little bit faster. And there's a lot of other very detailed spots that we changed slightly because we needed to change the airflow over the airplane.
Now, you mentioned that, that makes it perfect for everyday flying. In addition to racing this, are you using it as an everyday airplane for transportation and things?
I fly it all the time. I fly it a couple of times a week. I fly it up and down the West Coast, and I fly it out to lunch, and it's just a fun airplane for me to go out and do recreational stuff with.
So if somebody wanted to get a start putting together a kit airplane, what do they need? How much space, how much time, what kind of qualifications?
Well, they advertise that anybody can do it without any experience. There's two pieces of knowledge that you need to have to build the airplane, and one is how to work with fiberglass, and that's pretty easy. I'm pretty klutzy, and I learned how to do it, so it's that doesn't require any special skill. And then there's the engine and assembling the engine, not assembling the engine because you buy that assembled from the engine manufacturer, but hooking up the electronics and all of that, and that's probably requires somebody with some knowledge. I had a lot of help in that particular area. As a matter of fact, I had some people that were very smart that were giving me all of the dumb and easy jobs, and they were doing all the difficult ones. And anyway, but that's essentially how it came.
And so once you finish the airplane, before it can go fly, it does have to be certified by somebody who is licensed to look at that?
The actual rule is that if the airplane is built more than 51% by the pilot, that's really all that is required. So it's a paperwork process saying that I, as the pilot, built more than half of the airplane. Now, and you have to do that, and a FAA person comes in and signs that off, but they are not signing off that the airplane is the design is good, or that everything in the airplane is perfect. So you are responsible as the builder to do a good job. But then you've got a lot of incentive because you're going to be the guy flying it.
Now, to learn how to fly this, did you work with somebody else who had already built one, or did you have some time in a similar aircraft?
Well, I had a lot of military time, so I'm kind of an exception to what most of the people who fly these airplanes. Most of the people that fly these airplanes who are relatively low-time pilots will go out and fly a similar airplane with an instructor and get comfortable with it, and then they'll fly their own airplane.
So what's it like to take it out on the course? Flying low, flying fast, it's got to be a lot of adrenaline rush out there.
It's just pure fun. It makes a difference if it's a nice day or if it's a bumpy day. If it's a bumpy day, you're moving around a lot and it's a lot of work. But if it's a nice day and it's smooth out there and you're going around in a bank and you're seeing all the stuff go by the airplane fast, it's just so much fun you can't stand it. Most of the flying that we do is relatively high altitude, and when you're up high altitude and away from the ground, you don't have a big sensation of speed. So getting down close to the ground and seeing the ground go by really fast, it's just, you just go, wow, this is cool. And so this airplane's about 330 miles an hour, and up high, 330 miles an hour doesn't feel like anything, but down low, it just feels cool.
Thanks, Lee. Cool is an excellent way to describe flying low and flying fast in your airplane breathless. Since most airports don't have a gas station on every corner, and you can't very well taxi your airplane down the street to fill it up, how then do airplanes get fueled for flight? Airplanes use aviation gasoline, which is like the gasoline you put into your automobile, but with a higher quality and more strict quality controls to assure you get to your destination safely. At many airports, there are self-service and full-service fueling islands, or there are fuel trucks that come to your airplane. Here at Reno, the planes will taxi to the fuel trucks, fill up, and then move away for the next airplane to gas up. Most of the airplanes use the empty space inside the wings to hold the fuel, but some also have special tanks on the end of the wing called tip tanks, and some may also hold fuel in the fuselage, either behind or in front of the cockpit area. The jets use a specific blend of fuel called Jet A, which is a different blend of fuel specific to the requirements of a jet engine. And speaking of the jet class of racing, it is one of the newest to be added to Reno and has quickly become a fan favorite for their sleek lines and fast speeds. Let's take a few minutes to appreciate the jets as they move around the airport. It's her first year out here at Reno Racing, but Heather Penny is no stranger to flying and has a strong family history of aviation and racing to win. So Heather, it's your first year out here at PRS, but you grew up in kind of an aviation family and you've got a background. How did you actually get started? Did you know at a young age that you wanted to fly and that you wanted to be part of it?
Well, I'm a third-generation pilot. My grandfather was a World War II civilian instructor pilot, and then my father was a pilot, a fighter pilot in the active duty Air Force, and then when he got out of the active duty, became a guardsman here in the Reno Guard. So I grew up in Reno Stead, coming to the air races every year. If you ask my mom, she'll say I wanted to be a fighter pilot or some version of a pilot ever since I could toddle, you know, and maybe even talk. But I wanted to be a variety of things. I wanted to be a ballerina. I wanted to be a volcanologist. I thought about being a teacher. I thought about being a writer. I mean, when I was little, and really still today, the world is open to possibility. I have to say though, flying has always been a passion. It's been a theme in my life.
So how did you get started? Did you get started with your private license? Did you fly with your dad or your grandfather? Or what got the bug inside you?
Well, I had the bug, I think, long before I actually even started to pilot airplanes, simply because I fell in love with the community and fell in love with the planes. So before I actually even became a pilot in command, PIC, had my private pilot's license, I knew that I wanted to be involved in the aviation community in some kind of way. I was fortunate that when I was in college, my father helped me, supported me in getting my private pilot's license. And from then on, I just saved up every penny and worked as hard as I could as I was going through college and grad school to continue to fly as much as possible.
And you've also flown 2 tours of duty overseas, correct, in F-16s?
That's right. I was in grad school in 1994 when they opened combat aviation to women. And I had always wanted to be a fighter pilot, but since that wasn't open, my life had begun to take a different path. When that door did open, then I applied to every National Guard unit across the United States, trying to get in the door to go fly fighter jets. And I was very fortunate that I was hired by the DC Air National Guard to go fly F-16s.
So let's bring us up to the current today. You're here at PRS, you've got the plane that you're flying behind you. I take it that you didn't spend any time with this while you were in the service, so this is new.
No, you're right, this is new. While I was in the service, and I actually still am a traditional guardsman, now I fly Gulfstream 100s for the Air National Guard. I got out of F-16s about 1.5 years ago. I've got 2 little girls, they're 6 and 4 right now, and I just needed to be able to spend more time with them as well as my civilian job. The whole time I've been in F-16s, I've continued my love of general aviation, specifically vintage aircraft. I've got a Stinson, I have a Taylorcraft, I've been flying a Cessna 195. So this opportunity to race here and fulfill a dream that I've had ever since I was yay tall, well, it was just an incredible opportunity that arose about 4.5 weeks ago.
So was it just that jets came up, or that you were familiar with that, or did you want to fly in limiteds or super sport or T6s, or was it always a jet?
I've actually always been in love with unlimiteds. Jets are a fairly new class, and they've done a fantastic job of growing their fan base and growing the class base. We have an unprecedented number of jets this year in the jet class, and it's going to be very exciting, especially because jets in many ways are far more accessible to the general aviation public, if you will, than the heavy metal warbirds. So the unlimiteds has an incredible and very special mystique to me, and always will. Probably, I'm sure my dad has something to do with that. The opportunity for me to fly jets, fly in the jet race though, is really very special to me. Jets are where my experience is, and so it makes it a very natural transition to take my high performance jet experience from the F-16 and the military side and transfer it over onto the race course.
So how much can you actually transfer? What are the key differences between, flying in the military and flying here?
Actually, there are a lot of similarities between flying in the military and flying here on the course. The flight discipline, the formation flying, the geometry, the ability to see lines, it all comes together, and we just apply it in a very different way.
So the last question, how was it out there on the course today?
It was fantastic. This is a dream come true. The jet that you see behind me is not the jet that I'll be racing in September 2010. The jet that I'll be racing is an L-29, but we're modifying it to make it go faster. We're cleaning up the drag on the outside of the aircraft so it's slicker. It's not going to, be hung up quite so much. We're reducing the weight so that we can optimize the thrust performance of the engine. The engine this year is going to be stock, so we need to do everything we can to the airframe to make it go faster. Then next year we'll get a bigger airplane. We'll have more go juice.
Thanks, Heather. We wish you all the best in your racing career in the coming years. At every airport, large and small, there is a windsock, much like the one you are seeing on the screen right now. The job of the windsock is to show the direction that the wind is coming from so that the pilot can better determine how best to take off and land the airplane. Many airports also have a wind tee. This looks like a miniature airplane and always points into the wind to help the pilots who are above the airport determine the proper landing direction. Normally, the pilot will take off and land the airplane into the wind so that the wind is used to assist the airplane in transitioning into the air in a shorter distance and also to land at a slower speed, both for safety and a shorter landing distance. Because of the shape of the windsock, it automatically moves with any directional changes in the wind and also can help show how strong the wind is blowing by how much of the sock is inflated. One of the favorite racing classes here at Reno is the Unlimiteds. Let's take a few minutes to watch the big iron move around the ramp and to listen to the power of the engines, just as they roared through the skies over 60 years ago. There's nothing like the sound of a big radial or Merlin engine, and you saw Jay's excitement taxiing the big Corsair. Now let's hear from Jay about how his dream of flying this Corsair came true. All right, Jay, we've got the Corsair behind us, and you're flying that as part of the Unlimiteds. Can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in flying? Then let's get into where the airplane came from.
Sure. My name is Jay Consalvi. I'm from Canton, Massachusetts. I currently live in San Diego, California, and I've been flying all my life. My dad was a pilot, and he took me flying when I was 3 days old before I even went home from the hospital. So it's kind of in my blood, and I started flying for real in high school. I worked at an airport and got my pilot's license, and then I went to the Naval Academy and flew a bunch there, and then I got out of the Naval Academy and started flying in the Navy. I flew F-14s and F-18s, Super Hornets, and now I fly F-18 Legacy Hornets with the Marine Corps in San Diego.
How did you get started flying the Corsair?
This is a cool story. I just asked. I was at the Miramar Air Show 2 years ago, and I met the gentleman who was flying it, and we talked for a little while, and I said, how do I get to fly this thing? And he said, well, you need some tailwheel time. And I told him I owned a Stearman, and he introduced me to some other people, and I started flying their T6 in the Commemorative Air Force, and then I flew his T6, and then after a while he said, all right, you're ready. And I started flying the Corsair.
So it's actually a good lesson you don't get if you don't ask.
Absolutely.
So let's
Absolutely. It's always been a dream. This is my favorite airplane in the whole world. And I was like, you know what? I am going to fly one of these someday. So I just got to figure out how to do it. And it worked out the first time.
So tell us a little bit about this particular airplane and its history.
It's got some cool history. This airplane was built in 1945. It was designed, or it was contracted to be shipped off to Britain. And it was going to be a Lend-Lease airplane. It didn't go to Britain. It stayed here. And so it missed World War II, missed the end of the war. So it was in storage for a while, and they used it for a training airplane for a while, and then Korea came about, and it went to the Navy, and it was in VF-44, and it served on the USS Lake Champlain and the USS Boxer, and flew 300 to 400 hours of combat over Korea. So it's a legit warbird.
So the Corsair was one of the planes that actually landed on carriers and has some unique features. Can you kind of point those out to us and
Absolutely.
talk a little bit about them?
Well, looking at the airplane in general, you can see it's big. One of the first airplanes to use the R2800 and the big propeller it's got on it, that prop from tip to tip, is 13 feet 2 inches. So it's huge. The airplane was designed to be flown off of and landed back onto carriers. So they had to do something special with it, build it beefy like the Navy likes it, so it can crash into that carrier and catch a wire with its tail hook and stop. So they figured they couldn't put long spindly landing gear on it like they did on some other airplanes, so they put this big bend in the wing and put beefy landing gear on there. And then they put this tail hook here on the back, which I have it strapped up right now. And then they put these big old flaps in the airplane.
And the flaps slow it down?
The flaps help slow it down, and the airplane will fly real slow around the pattern. And if you look, see where the cockpit is compared to where the prop is, you're way, way back there, and you can't see much out in front of you. So the pilots back in the day would, if they're going to land this way on the boat, would come around the aircraft carrier and do a constant turn all the way till they're about to touch down, and then they'd kick out and touch down.
So it was a different approach than people make today.
It was a different approach than people. Well, actually, we pretty much do the same thing today, and it's all because of this airplane.
So now let's fast forward to today. What is it like to take this around the course at the altitudes that you're flying and the speeds that you're flying?
It's unbelievably fun. I can't believe that we get to do this. First of all, just flying the airplane for me is such a blast, and it's an honor because there's only 19 of these things left in the world that fly. And I figure pretty much on any given day when I'm flying it, I'm the only person in the world flying it. And then we bring it to Reno and fly around the course. And we're down there at 50 to 100 feet, race around the pylons. I'm doing about 250 knots. So what, 300-ish miles an hour. And just picturing myself flying around the pylons with those bent wings, cocked over, it just gives me chills right now telling you about it. It's so exciting.
Jay Consalvi had his dream of flying a Corsair come true. And if you set your goals and focus on the results, hopefully all of your dreams will come true also. Moving from one of the largest and most powerful classes of racing planes to one of the smallest, enjoy a few minutes of watching the Formula Series planes. It's almost like wearing the airplane.
I'm working on it. Just make sure when we double triple.
Formula Series of racing planes are a great way to get started in racing if that's your desire. And here's Formula One Class President Smokey Young to tell you more about them.
Well, this is a Formula One racing plane right next to me, and as you can see, it's a very sleek and very pretty airplane, lots of flowing lines, and these airplanes are built to very exacting specifications. Like Formula Auto Racing, Formula One Air Racers have to adhere to design criteria. Basically, a minimum of 66 square feet of wing area, which means the length of the wing multiplied times its width can't be any less than 66 square feet. We always have a Continental O200 engine, which means it displaces 200 cubic inches, and the engines are fairly stock. We balance and blueprint them to get maximum performance. Most of the Formula One racers have carbon fiber or composite propellers, like you can see on this one. Very, very lightweight. And then the race planes have to have fixed main landing gear. So what you'll see on all the Formula One racers is you'll have two main wheels up front with a little tiny tail wheel in the back. The Formula One racers race on a course that's 3.11 miles long, and it's an oval marked by 6 pylons. So we enter the course from takeoff. We take off all 8 airplanes that are racing, take off at once from the runway, and then turn onto the race course. We fly 8 laps when we're on the race course, and race planes like number 12 here have top speeds of over 250 miles an hour. When we're on the course, we're flying between 50 and 75 feet above the ground. And again, there's 8 of us out there together, and just like a car race, we're trying to pass each other and see who can finish the 8 laps and get to the finish line first. So it's very exciting and a lot of fun to watch.
Thanks, Smokey. The Formula One class is one that allows for a cost-affordable entry into racing for anyone who has a dream of competitive flying. At most large airports, you will see numbers alongside the runway. These numbers let the pilot know how much of the runway is left for the plane to take off or land. Each number represents 1,000 feet. If you see the number 5, it means that 5,000 feet of runway is still remaining. Many runways are between 6,000 and 10,000 feet in length, but some, like those at NASA's Cape Canaveral or Edwards Air Force Base, may be 15,000 feet or even longer. Because airplanes need more runway to take off in hotter temperatures and higher altitudes, you will see longer runways typically in these environments. Another class of racing that provides an affordable entry to racing is the biplane class. The biplanes all have 2 wings and resemble planes from the early days of aviation. Let's take a few minutes to watch the biplanes in action around Reno. to talk about the biplane class is third-generation pilot Mike Stubbs.
My family's been flying since 1929. I'm third generation. I started flying in 1967. I started coming up to Reno in 1979. Got tired of just sitting in the stands and thought, I can do this. And I had some aerobatic time and some tail dragger time, which tail draggers, by the way, are airplanes as they were many, many years ago. They have a tail, not a nose wheel. They're a little harder to operate in ground handling and landing, but they actually give you more tools in bad winding conditions when you're trying to land. But I purchased a race plane that already had been racing up here in 1985, brought it back in 86, and I raced it and kept working on it and made the engine more powerful and streamlined it and got better at it for about 14 years. I started running about 195 in the straightaways. When I bought the plane, it was only going about 150, so I made a lot of fun with it. But since then, our class now has an airplane on the course every September going 260. And so I started transitioning and learning how to be the class operations officer, handling launching the airplanes in the air and landing them, as well as doing all the paperwork that goes with that. And my job is to work with our airplanes. We have 24 every year in September, and the Reno Air Race Authority, who puts on these races. That's my job. I get to be out there. It's the best seat in the house. I can stand right on the runway. I'm the only guy who gets to do that besides the pilots.
And you're also working here at PRS with helping to train the new pilots and get them acclimated and familiar as well.
I'm one of the 2 instructor pilots that is up here every June for 4 days, teaching anybody that wants to enter the races in our particular class, the biplane class. 13 years ago, they started requiring anybody new, we call rookie pilots, to go through a 4-day training seminar. They call it the Pylon Racing Seminar. It's now required by insurance, and for logical reasons, it really it's too much to try to learn when you come up here for Air Race Week.
So let's talk a little bit about the airplane behind you. Tell us, what makes it different from some of the other airplanes that are out there, some of the planes that people may fly for personal use, and talk about speeds and what it's like to fly low.
Well, there are 6 classes of airplanes that race up in Reno. The biplanes, which have 2 wings, as you can see, are a carryover from the early years of racing and the early years of airplanes. 1910, 1920s, 1930s, almost everything was a biplane. Eventually, biplanes went away because there was more drag in the air and you couldn't go as fast. But they've never completely gone away. A lot of people have continued to buy and build and make smaller biplanes for aerobatic training. That means going up and doing loops and rolls, as well as air racing. So they're a very sturdy airplane. They're very small, so they're very difficult to handle on landing. Very touchy, takes a lot of practice. But so we maintain that particular class up here at Reno at the Air Races. Guys all year long fly biplanes in aerobatics and practice, but they get to come up here and race. It's the only place in the world where this goes on anymore, and I'm always thankful I'm part of that.
So if somebody wanted to purchase their own biplane, get trained, come up and race, how would they get started in that?
They would need a certain amount of pilot training already. They obviously already would have to be a licensed pilot. They would already have to have some time, we call it time in the biplane, meaning they would already have needed some maybe 100 hours of flight time in a biplane so they can learn to handle it. We can't train them how to fly it up here. What we need to train them is how to go further than that, how to race it, how to handle it in very low level conditions with other airplanes going around at the same time at 50 feet high. So you have to have that initial amount of time in the airplane, and then you sign up for what we call our rookie pylon school in June. If you go through this 4 days and you pass it, you can also come in September and race in our class.
And the other thing that is different with your class is that you do a start with all of the planes on the runway all going off together.
Correct. There's two classes that do that. The formulas, which are a single wing version of this, and ours, the biplanes, are actually positioned stopped with the engines running on the runway. And when we drop flags, they will leave in 4-second intervals. It's really the best way to do it because it's very difficult to see out of our biplanes when you're up making any amount of maneuvers. The top wing will block out some of your forward vision in a turn, and the bottom wing will do the same thing. The low wing, single wing airplanes don't have quite that obstruction as we do. So
what's it like to fly 50 feet off the ground at 200 plus miles an hour?
It is probably the fastest thing you can think of doing. It's the fastest motor sport in the world. Faster than Indianapolis, faster than NASCAR. Our fastest classes up here, our unlimiteds, are going 500 miles an hour. We don't go that fast, but our fastest airplane goes 260. And when you're that low, everything's coming by so fast that training is so important. And one thing we always caution all of our pilots, don't come out here tired, don't come out here sick. You need to be 100% aware of the day because you just touch the stick and you're in the ground. So it's not for the faint of heart.
Thanks, Mike. Making sure that you are 100% for any activity that is critical is great advice, and hopefully something that you will carry with you always. When the T6 racing class is out on the course, almost everything else stops on the field as those big and loud radial engines reverberate that unique sound for miles around. Have a look and a listen. Here's Dennis Bune, a proud owner of 6 T6 airplanes, to talk about one of his planes and also to talk about what it's like to fly the plane on the course here at Reno. And you are the proud owner of a 6-pack of T6s that are out here at PRS.
Yes, I am, and this particular airplane is a 1942 AT6 Texan. It was built in North American of Dallas, Texas, and actually it flew with a number of air forces. As you look at the side of the airplane, it was originally with the Army Air Corps in World War II. We sent it to England, it flew it to the United Kingdom, who in turn sent it down to South Africa. She was in the South African Air Force training pilots. After World War II, the U.S. gave it to Paraguay. And they flew it till about 1990, and she returned to the United States and became a civil registered AT6, and she raced actually as foreplay. Now she's Midnight Miss the Third, Of course, it's my third racing T6 with the number 43. We started racing in 1972 when we took off the ramp here at Reno, just like the sport biplanes. We're here at the 2010 Pylon Racing School at Reno. We've done the Reno flybys and we've got requalified, and hey, we're ready to come back in September. Just kind of walking around the airplane, this airplane will do well over 200 miles an hour. It'll go probably around 235 to 240 miles an hour. It's a race airplane. This airplane's slick. We had a little guy land here and he tripped, and wow, we got a little track record on Sky Flyer. He's our little friend. He goes around the pylons with us, and we parked him up here at the top. So he's got his head out and he's looking for traffic. We go around number 43. She's a slick airplane. You look down this wing and it's like glass. You know, just like your mom's tabletop. If you're eating your cereal in the morning, make sure you get those Wheaties because you want to stay healthy and come to those Reno Air Races.
Is there something you do to keep the surfaces nice and slick on a regular basis?
Oh yes, we do. We have a special wax. It's a special formulated wax, and of course before the races we spend a few weeks and we get the airplane all shined up. You got to keep her in great trim and fine shape. And of course we've worked on the engine. It's polished and ported, and it's a race engine like those race car boys. You know, you go to the track and watch the fast boys. Well, that's what this is. She's a healthy engine. We just kind of went through it. It's all tuned up, and we're looking forward to September, back when we come to the 2010 National Championship Air Races.
Can we talk a little bit about the engine? Because one of the things that you notice about the T6s is that they are very loud. The other thing that you notice about them is that they fly one of the tighter formations going around the race course, which makes them very nice to photograph and also good for the audience to look at.
You're right. The AT6 Texan is a stock class, so we have to basically keep the same profile, the airframe, the wingspan. There are a number of changes, like it being very slick. We've stripped out a lot of the equipment, the bomb racks and the gun emplacements, and of course we've flushed in all the screws. The engine itself, like you said, is Pratt & Whitney's original design from 1920s. It was the engine in the Ford tri-motor and the Boeing biplanes the Navy had. And it was an air-cooled engine, which it still is, and it's gone through a series of changes and upgrades over the years, but it's what you see on the crop dusters today. And so this Pratt & Whitney is, as the slogan says, very dependable.
So what is it like to fly this around the pylons at, you know, the low altitude? Because normally you don't fly, you know, from here to there at this altitude.
Correct. We have to stay at the height of the pylon can at the top. That's our goal, and we fly at approximately 75 feet. You're out of ground effect, but there's some bugs there.
Thanks, Dennis. The T6 races are one of the most competitive, as the guidelines for the airframe and engine are very consistent, so the planes fly a very tight race every time. In addition to the runway distance markers we talked about earlier in the program, most airports have a series of signs and markings to help the pilots safely navigate the taxiways getting to and from the runways. In the first example, the yellow A indicates that you are currently on the A or Alpha taxiway. To clarify all conversations between pilots and controllers, each letter of the alphabet has a name associated with it, so there is no confusion. The letter A is Alpha, B is Bravo, and each of the other letters continues with standardized words. This is called the phonetic alphabet for aviation. The number 3 indicates the location on the Alpha taxiway. To the right of the yellow A3 is a red color around the numbers 8 and 26. Because the first number is 8, that indicates that runway 8 is to the left and runway 26 is to the right. Every runway at each airport is given a number, and that number corresponds to the direction of alignment of the runway. If you add a 0 to each runway number, it gives you the compass direction of the runway. North is 0 or 360 degrees. South is 180 degrees. East is 90 degrees, and west is 270 degrees. In this case, the number 8 means that the runway is 80 degrees and is almost due east. Runway 26 is 260 degrees and is almost due west. Now that we know what the different markings are around the airport, it's time to see how the airplanes get moved around when they aren't under their own power. Let's talk to Larry Beck, Doc Blevins, and Art Hastings about how they gently move the airplanes around the ramp, safely and quickly to assure that the show goes on as scheduled. So you guys just got done moving one of the airplanes. Tell me what's involved in that. What you got to be careful of. You go, you hook up, you move it, looking for other airplanes, making sure you don't hit anything, damage the airplane. Give me a run through.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, but in your words.
He said, dang, you're 100%.
Go ahead, Larry.
You covered it very well, except you left out the word gentle. These airplane owners get really upset unless we're very gentle with their airplanes.
Every airplane is a little different too. For example, the one we just moved, which is an L-29, these are Eastern Bloc airplanes, and everybody has a little different way of towing. Primarily, and of course, as Larry says, you know, all of these owners are very particular about their airplanes, as well as they should be. And right now, when there's not a lot of people around, it's not too difficult. But with during race week, when there's just literally thousands of people swarming around, not only do you have to take care of the airplane, but you also got to take care of passengers or people that are wanting to see and or not paying attention. Number one, Larry's been doing this for years and years and years, and so he's our guru.
What you have to be aware of out here is that everybody has an interest in airplanes. They are not interested in the one that you're towing.
So give me one of your best experiences for moving an airplane, whether it was a unique airplane or something happened, nothing damaging. But
hey, Doc.
Howdy. A couple of years ago, we had 3 F-7F Tiger Cats here. That was the highlight of my career, to get to move one of those World War II fighters.
Which one was it?
It was the one that belongs to Clay Lacey.
Hey, Larry, how fast does this go?
You see it, 154 miles an hour. Fastest tug in the world.
Were you driving?
Yes.
How did it feel?
You have to remember that there are no springs on this tug. It felt quite rough. Another thing you need to remember is not to believe everything you read.
I don't know about you, but I'm not sure that Larry is telling the entire truth when he says the tug was going 154 miles an hour. Something sounds just a little fishy. I think Larry was right when he said, don't believe everything that you read. That's a great lesson. All of the interviews and features that we've shown you so far have been with powered flight. Let's change it up a little now and take a look at a quiet and colorful means of getting up, and away. The balloons are beautiful to watch as they are built and filled for launch. Let's talk with Barry Verischetti about what it takes to get up early and go balloon flying.
So it's basically what we're going to do is we cold air inflate it as we pack it in with cold air, and then we start to heat it up, and then it becomes buoyant, and that's what causes it to stand up. Once we stand up, then we can heat up enough that we make the air inside lighter than the air outside, and then it lifts off. And so that's how we do it. We use the buoyancy to lift the load, whatever that is, passengers in the basket and everything like that.
So all of this pretty much fits on the van. You pack it in the basket, then you unpack it.
Right. Yeah, we store everything in the trailer. We have a bag for the envelope, and that's what fabric is called. And the basket and the burner bar and everything go inside the trailer. Takes us about 30 minutes to set up total, but this thing will, in cold air inflate in about 5 to 8 minutes, and then we'll go to hot air inflation and we'll stand up.
So what are your flight limitations? Is it, up to like 5 knots or?
Well, every pilot's different. You have to decide that for yourself. Personally, about 5 to 7 knots would be where I would be comfortable landing in any kind of residential area or out here. If you were in the desert, you might be able to go farther or faster, because you have a lot more room to land. So it all depends on where you're going to fly, what your flight plan intends.
So the burners that you're using on this rated to something I might have in my house as far as a heater?
Basically, we'll use as many BTUs in a 2-hour flight as the average person will use to heat a 1,400 square foot house for a month.
So what does it take to get flight qualified in this?
Basically, you have to have 10 hours of instruction with a certified instructor. Any commercial pilot in hot air balloons is a certified instructor. Then you have to take a written test and a flight test by a designated examiner. It's controlled by the FAA. I have a pilot's license like any other pilot does. And to go from one type of aircraft to another, I just take a certification test in that.
And then do you also, in addition to racing and exhibition, do rides?
We do rides. Most of the rides in this balloon are donated rides that we do to help the community in fundraisers and things like that.
So this is more fun for you?
This is, we're sport balloonists more than commercial balloonists. We do this because it's fun. And try and keep it that way.
Thanks for giving us an inside look at the world of ballooning, Barry. It's so much different than powered flight and a unique experience for both pilot and passengers. Before we get to our final interview, I'd like to thank Valerie Miller and all the great staff and volunteers who make the Reno Air Races possible for all of us to enjoy each year. I'd also like to thank Walt Lindblom, who helped me with capturing all this great video and audio for this project. And also to Vince McNay for his great work with graphics and post-production. Thanks to all the pilots and crew who volunteered their time to bring all of these great planes to Reno for us to view and enjoy. And a special thank you to all of you for purchasing and watching this to keep the dream of flight alive in the next generation of both kids and adults. For the final interview, we've got a real treat with an extended discussion with pilot and instructor Rick Van Dam of the jet class of racing planes. Before we talk to Rick, let's watch as the jet crews get the ramp cleaned up before starting the jets and taxiing out to the runway. In order to prevent small rocks and other objects from damaging the jet's engines, the FOD walkers line up and remove any small objects that could be ingested into these engines. FOD stands for Foreign Object Damage. Sleek lines, fun to watch, and cutting quickly through the air. That explains the jet class perfectly. And now, here to give us a very in-depth look at both the airplane and the pilot requirements for the jet class is pilot and instructor Rick Van Dam. Rick always brings a great insight and explanation to all things flying. So Rick, we're in front of race 5 here at the jet class at PRS here at Reno. Talk a little bit about what the airplane is, what it's like to fly the course, some of the unique things about the airplane that the audience would really like.
Well, this is race 5, American Spirit. It's actually was a Czechoslovakian fighter jet built over in Prague, Czechoslovakia in 1973 and was used extensively in the factory as one of their test airplanes for the development of the L-39 Albatross. The particular one I have here has been highly modified for racing here in Reno. So it's not to be confused with the one that they give the guys out in the field. We've done a lot of extensive aerodynamic work, cleaning up the flow around the airplane, changing the wingtips, changing the center of gravity on the airplane. But I'll show you a little of that as we walk around. Some of the things here is, you can't really see it from there, but this is a 2-seat airplane built as a trainer. We've taken out all of the instrumentation in the back there. That was about 300 pounds on an 8,000 pound airplane by getting rid of that. As we make an airplane lighter, it takes less power, which therefore makes us go faster. When we first raced this airplane in 2000, we were going about 450 miles an hour. Now we're flying it at around 515 miles an hour. This year we hope to be about 530 miles an hour.
So Rick, what we're hearing in the back is actually the engine kind of freewheeling in the...
That's correct. On a jet airplane, as opposed to your car, which is called an internal combustion. On a jet airplane, all of the air goes in the intake and it goes through what we call a fan, very similar to the fan that's on your ceiling fan at home or a fan just blowing around. Well, the air goes in and it runs through the fan, which compresses the air. By compressing the air, we're able to put a lot more air. We put it under very high pressure, which makes it very hot. We put fuel in it and ignite it, and it goes through the opposite side called a turbine. And as it expands through the turbine, that's what gives us thrust in a jet airplane. What you actually hear here is that as the wind blows, it's running around by itself. And it will do that, and we want for it to be able to run around by itself. It means that there's very little friction in the motor. And anytime you would rather, for friction, you would rather skate across an ice rink than drag your feet across concrete. The ice will skate because you don't have nearly as much friction.
That's a great analogy.
Now, as we head out the airplane here, there's a couple things we've installed here. This is called a vortex generator. And what that does is, the aerodynamic term is, it energizes the air. Now that might sound a little odd, but it actually causes the air to come up and swirl over the wing right here. And we do that to help hold the air tight against the wing, which gives us a lot better flow of the air, which gives us less drag, which makes the airplane faster. If we come out here, we were one of the first to do this. As you can see on this airplane right behind me, you can see that tank right on the end of the wing. That tank holds about 30 gallons of gasoline. We used to have one of those on here. We've taken the tank off. We've gone with a highly modified aerodynamic design winglet with the flare here that you're starting to see on some of the new jets. By doing that, we were able to reduce the drag, which is the air resistance slowing the airplane down. We were able to reduce it by so much that this alone, we were able to make the airplane go 25 miles an hour faster and actually use less fuel doing it. So it's kind of a win-win proposition for the pilots. Now, as we proceed around the backside, this is our primary control, which keeps us on the race course. These are called ailerons, and that's how we roll the airplane left and right. In the airplane, we have a stick, and the stick moves left and right, which causes the airplane to turn. Much like you watch your parents turn the steering wheel in their car. But instead of turning around a course in a car like this level, we take the entire airplane and turn it. So that's a little different. Inboard of this is a flap. This goes down and helps us, it hangs down below the wing and helps us land at a slower airspeed. We would have to land the airplane about 20 miles an hour faster if we did not have the flap on the airplane.
So Rick, the difference between the flaps and the ailerons is the flaps go down in unison on each wing and the ailerons are opposite.
That is correct, and I should have said that. Because we're using the ailerons to make the airplane roll by lifting it or dropping it, the one on the other side goes the opposite way, so they kind of go like this, which makes you roll the airplane. The flaps go down, and they go down on both sides, which then allows the airplane to fly at a slower airspeed. So it helps us land the airplane. It just makes the landing a little safer by being a little slower. Now, one of the other things, now up here on top, right after the race 5, you can see our rudder. And the rudder is actually, as you sit there, and we call it yaw. It's the airplane, it feels like it's going back and forth like this, which is kind of, if you go around in a car a little too fast, you can feel yourself going like that. We want to prevent the airplane from doing that, because we turn in to any of our turns this way, yaw would make the nose go like this or this. So we use our feet to control the rudder. The last thing I'm going to talk about on the airplane, this is referred to as the horizontal stabilizer, and behind it we have the elevator. And the elevator is actually what makes the airplane go up or down. So the stick in the airplane, as we pull it back, it makes the airplane go up, and as we push it forward, it makes the airplane go down. Now, one of our secret modifications that we did to this airplane is when the Czechoslovakian military operated, they have little devices that hang down from the tail right here. And the tail allows the airplane to fly a little slower and a little more controllable. One of our secrets that we used on this airplane, we took these off the airplane, and that helped make the airplane go about 5 miles an hour faster, 5 to 8 miles an hour faster. It makes it a little more sensitive to fly, but that's what racing is all about.
We'll be right back with the second part of Rick's interview. Now for a special treat, let's join Jet Class President Phil Fogg as he takes us around the race course from a bird's eye view.
As we start here, we've already taken off and we are forming up in what we call a rejoin. And that means there's a pace plane, and the first qualifier will fly directly on his right wing, and then all of the qualifiers in the order in which they qualified will form up on that pace plane. And when we're all formed up, then we start a long turn around Mount Peavine, which is just south of Reno Stead. And so you come around Mount Peavine, and then the pace plane will say, "Jets, bring it up online." And bring it up online, it means you're line abreast with the pace plane, and it's a very difficult formation to fly because you don't have the visual angle reference that you typically have in a standard formation. But he brings us up line abreast in preparation for the start. And now we've been straightened out. He's brought us up line abreast, and you're looking straight ahead out of my jet at the Reno Stead Airport and the race course. Now, as we get down to about this point, he will, if we're lined up evenly, he will say, "Gentlemen, you have a race." At which time, all of the racers will go to full power, and we'll continue this slight descent until we get down to and on the race course, and we'll enter at Pylon 4 and start racing. So now we're evidently all still fairly even, but you'll see that the pole sitter and the faster airplanes have begun to move ahead.
What is it like to fly that low? Because normally in a jet, you're up a little bit higher, and here you're, 70, 80 feet?
We are anywhere up to 250 feet. So the guys that fly the highest will maybe up as high as it, but I like to fly at about 75 or 80 feet. And now you'll see there, as you go around 7 and 8, that feeling of being very low. I've been racing for a long time, and I don't think too much about it. It's where I like to fly. But this is not something for the average airplane driver to go out and do. These guys are pros, and they've been doing it a long time.
So how long have you had the jet, and when did you start racing it?
Well, I've had the jet for 5 years, and I started racing it the first year I bought it. But I was a Formula One racer for many years, starting back in the 70s.
And so how was the transition from Formula One to jet?
It was a very easy transition, because I think once you learn to fly a race course with an airplane, it's very similar for both classes.
So I know you only get to race either once or twice a year, depending upon whether you come out to PRS or not. Mm-hmm. What are you doing with the jet the rest of the year?
Well, I enjoy flying the jet for pleasure. I like to take some friends for rides occasionally. I belong to an organization called Classic Jet Aircraft Association, where on a number, maybe 4 or 5 times a year, we get together what other people call a fly-in. We call it a jet blast. We get together and we train, we go over safety procedures, we fly formation, and we have a lot of fun acting like kids my age.
Okay, so Phil, do us a favor and take us around the race course once in your race 8.
All right, I'd be glad to. We're going to start right now on the home stretch, the crowd here, the home pylon, and we begin to go by the runway. Pylon 1 starts the race, and we're in practically a 90-degree dive. We'll pass pylons 2, pylons 3, brings us out to the north end of the race course where the terrain comes up closer to us. So we're really flying a flat line, but we get seemingly lower because the terrain comes up to us. And then hiding right down here is pylon 4, and you see it there. We're coming tight around pylon 4. At that point, you start to look up ahead and look at pylon 5. Once you've got that made, you're seeking now to see pylon 6. Passing pylon 6 puts you into what we call the valley of speed. It's valley of speed because you get to go wings level or almost momentarily and build up a little speed before you start into 7 and 8, and we're back to home pylon in approximately 59 to 1 minute, 59 seconds to 1 minute at about 500 miles an hour.
Phil, thank you for that special treat from Jet Race 8. Now back to Rick Van Dam, who has moved into the cockpit for the final portion of his session.
Okay, I'd like to talk a little bit about the cockpit of the L-39 as we get ready to go out and race. It's very important that one thing is we're concerned about safety. And so that's why a lot of the stuff that I start with right here is I'm wearing a Nomex fireproof flight suit. It is to help us just in case. In a moment, I will be getting my gloves and you will see my crash helmet. Now, one of the nice things about the crash helmet we have that is special built in is we have a microphone, and that allows us to talk to all the other airplanes. So we'll have that. And we also have a very nice little feature here. We have so we don't have to wear sunglasses. We will have a little shade that comes down over our eyes. And so that helps us, when we're running around, because if you were wearing sunglasses in the airplane, as we go around the race course, they would have a tendency to come off. So this is a safety feature that helps us. Now, in the cockpit, we strap in. What we will be doing is getting into, there's two parts of it. One is we're getting into a parachute right now. The parachute is, again, a safety feature that we have, and it's just like a parachute that you've seen on TV, and this one, but this one is actually attached to the ejection seat here. If we had a serious problem and had to get out of the airplane, we would use the seat to help us get out of the airplane. We would get rid of the canopy, the seat would come out, and we would then deploy our parachute. It's a little different. It's something very common in fighter type aircraft, not in the civilian transport aircraft when you're just traveling around the country. Now, once I have strapped into the airplane, I will be getting the canopy down, and now the canopy comes down and we will seal it. And it's these rollers right here that will lock it in place. As we get this airplane going faster and faster, there's a very high pressure area built around the airplane, and it tries to make the canopy actually come off the airplane. So we have 4 very large latches to hold this down. And then we're able to add air in the cockpit to pressurize the cockpit to keep us comfortable while we race. But once again, one of the secrets to the race team is we turn off the air conditioner because the air conditioner gets its cold air from the engine. So right before the race, we turn ours off. So that little power goes into the engine and will make us go faster. One of the secrets of racing.
So Rick, a race is typically how many laps, and what do you do to prepare for it before you go out mentally?
Well, it's the races we're running in this class. We're doing 6-lap races. We fly around an 8.5 mile course, which kind of the best way we describe it as an egg. It's a little short on the top end and a little fat on the bottom end. But as we get ready, it's very important to there are 9 airplanes in the race, and kind of a little different than when you watch one of the aerobatic teams on TV, like the Thunderbirds or the Blue Angels. They are all out there trying to do the same thing. When you're racing, we are right next to another airplane, and we refer to this as non-cooperative formation. So it's a little different than what the aerobatic guys do. You have an airplane next to you, you just might not want him to be there. You would rather be going faster than he is. So we try to pass people by doing that. Now, to get mentally prepared for this, a race typically will last about 7 minutes. We will take off, we will join all 9 airplanes up with a pace airplane, and we will fly very good formation off the pace airplane while they get everyone lined up. Kind of what they do when you watch the automobile races on the weekend. They all line up together, everyone has their place based on how they qualify, and then we have a pace plane, like a pace car. He gets us all lined up and gets us headed for the race course, and then we call it a release, where he says, you have a race. And at that point, we all go to full power, and we get the airplanes going as fast as we can, and we fly around 9, we refer to them as pylons. There's pillars out here in the Nevada dirt that would give us about an 8.5-mile course, but we have to go around them. If you cut inside of them, that is a penalty, and the penalty slows you down. So we're all going around all 9 pylons. We do 6 laps. So a race is typically, on the order of about 60 miles, and it takes about 6 minutes to do. Some of the other things we do to prepare ourselves for the race is we get mentally prepared. It's very important when you're doing something that is very hazardous and that you get, as a friend of mine said, when you start racing, you learn to concentrate. So typically a half an hour to an hour before the race, you will see the pilot probably by himself, and he is thinking his way through everything we're getting ready to occur. He is thinking about the race, he is thinking about the race course, he's thinking about what's going to be going on in his airplane. We have a lot of dials and gauges and instruments that are monitoring the engine, our airspeed, our altitude, and all that. He has to put those kind of in the back of his mind, because we're going to be flying 40 to 60 feet off the ground in excess of 500 miles an hour. And you have to learn to concentrate on what you're doing at that time. And you cannot get distracted by someone or something around you. So it's very important to get in a mind where you're ready to do that. Now, as we get out to the race, we get into the airplane, there's a lot of things we do. The race itself, we will be pulling about what's called 6 Gs. A G is a force of gravity. As you stand there, as everyone stands on Earth, they are experiencing 1 G. I weigh about 200 pounds just standing. When I race, I typically pull 6 to 6.5 Gs. That means that I weigh 1,200 pounds. So a lot of little things that you don't think about when you're driving your car. While we're racing, I have these 1,200 pounds, so my arm is being pulled down. My shoulder harnesses are being pulled down, and everything is forcing me down, including the blood inside your body. The blood typically leaves your heart and goes up to your head. Well, when you're pulling these 6 Gs, it's being forced down. So we find ourselves contracting as many muscles as we can to hold the blood up into our head so we don't pass out, which you could see would be very detrimental. So it's very much training. So typically you will see, as the pilot sits down in his airplane, we go through some exercises, typically like you see an athlete stretching. We will be doing very much the same thing, because as we're going around the race course, we're going through all the same motions that an athlete is, as far as getting their heart working, getting the blood pumping, and exerting ourselves through a lot of external forces. Now, while we're doing that, we have to keep track of 8 other airplanes. And so that's where I said we have to have the mind to concentrate. Now you have to have your mechanic, and you have to have the confidence in your aircraft that he has taken care of the mechanical details that you need for the race, because we are very task oriented and we're concentrating on the airplanes, the ground, the pylons, and what we're doing. We do not have a lot of time to look at instruments and hear warning bells and some of the typical things you would normally find in a recreational or a civilian pilot. So that's the mindset we get in prior to the race.
Rick, I can't thank you enough for sharing your great insight with us. It is always a pleasure to sit down and listen to your stories of pilot and planes and achieving the greatest success of both. I hope that you've enjoyed watching this program as much as we've enjoyed making it, and that you will continue to watch it again and again. As a special bonus, we've included another 50 minutes of material featuring the sights and sounds of Reno. It is full of all different classes of airplanes and shows engines starting, airplanes taxiing, taking off, landing, and of course racing around. There's no narration or interviews, just the sights and sounds of being at Reno. I hope you'll continue to enjoy this over and over again.
got 4 quarts. 7.5 gallons.
Make it hot! ready.
Good show, guys.
Jack.